It is 5:01, and we have a quorum. And is there any comment on closed session items?
No comments?
Being no comment, the board meeting is recorded, and we will move into our closed session at 5:02. Welcome to the Valley Center-Pauma Unified School District School Board meeting. And we have a quorum present. It is 6:05. And we are going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and Stephanie is going to lead us in it. Thank you. And there is nothing to report out of closed session, and we will move to the approval of our agenda. Any additions, deletions, or corrections?
Yes, President Stroh, we have a addition for a contract list, and it's the, we have an addition. It's
Okay.
the application for the CTE grant for the ag at the middle school. So we've already added that.
Okay, great. Do I have any other discussion? Well, let's go for a motion.
Also move.
Okay, Member Benjamin moves a second.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay, we will go for the vote. Member Benjamin?
Aye.
Member Caputo? Aye. Member Caputo? Member Kolb Senior? Aye. And Member Polito? Aye. And Member Stroh votes aye. This is the great part of this meeting. It's recognitions and presentations. This month is our district employee, and the employee of the month is, can't do it without her, Nancy Cummings, our classified employee of the month.
Well, this is kind of a nice different angle of the board I haven't had in a while.
Yeah.
But I'd like to bring up our certificate, our classified employee of the month, Ms. Nancy Cummings. Congratulations. Nancy started in our district several years ago at the high school. She was going to only work part-time, and she was going to be the athletic department secretary. She then went on to help out in attendance. Real quickly, we realized that she has some unbelievable skills. Shortly after that, about almost 6 years ago now, she was moved down to the superintendent's office with Mary Gorsuch for about 6 months, and I was lucky enough that when I got there, she had already broken everything in with the 6-month period and really helped me kind of slide right into being superintendent. I'm really appreciative of that. But Nancy is really the glue that holds everything together at our district office, and truly it would not be as fun and a great experience every day without the things that Nancy does, whether it's putting together birthday parties with some of the other gals in the office, or making sure everybody just gets a hello when they walk in the back part of the office. And really, I mean, for me, she provides a couple of things. One is she calms me when I need to be calm. She makes sure I'm riled up when I need to be riled up. And she just always kind of balances me, and I really appreciate that. And one of the best things that I see from Nancy is we get people in the district office, especially wanting to see the superintendent, who are often very frustrated, they're very upset, they're very emotional. I mean, we're talking about people's kids, and you know, people have the right. I mean, it's your child. And Nancy just has a great way about her that when she meets with these parents and even employees, of just kind of bringing everything down a couple of notches. Just by the way that she's so caring, she listens to what their concerns are. The people already feel like, okay, someone's going to be, you know, I'm being heard. Someone's going to listen to me. And by the time a lot of the time they get to my office, it's all about how do we solve what we got going on here. And she really has a way of de-escalating things that I think, for me anyways, really provides the opportunity to help people solve their problems, because she kind of takes that de-escalating part out of it, or into it. So I appreciate that very much, Nancy. And then a couple of things that some of the colleagues down at the district office had to say about Nancy. Nancy is an individual with superpowers. She multitasks and takes care of everyone around her. Another person at the district office, she does not hesitate to support and provide guidance to critical situations and challenges. She demonstrates kindness and grace in all of her interactions. And I think that is really true. And lastly, Nancy is amazing. She has an answer to every single question. I aspire to rise to her level of professionalism and expertise. So Nancy Cummings, our Employee of the Month for the district office, thank you very much for your service.
can do, I'll de-escalate and we can do whatever you want. Oh, thank you so much. This is so unexpected and very, very kind of you to give me. Dan's here, and when Dan and I moved up here about 20 years ago, one of the deciding factors in our move was we had heard so much about the school district and about what a special place it was. In fact, the word was that it was practically a private school education, but in the public school setting. And I am so appreciative of all of you. Our children went through, they've graduated, gone on to college. They had an amazing school experience, and I have you all to thank for that. And I'm just so very fortunate. I get to work with people who are more than colleagues. You're my friends. I've known many of you for years and love you very much. I get to work for my best friend. Well, on some days, my best friend. On other days, you're just a good friend. But no, just in all seriousness, thank you very much. I am deeply, deeply blessed and very, very grateful. So thank you.
And I'd just like to say a few little things because she has truly been a blessing, but she is a woman of grace, of great wisdom, and this district has been truly blessed by Nancy and just her touch and multitude ways and attributes that she has touched the school and our children and staff. So thank you, Nancy. And our certificated is Stephanie Jones, and what an honor it is to have her, and Doyen is going to chat about her. Congratulations.
I wish I would have gone first, though, because that was a little heartfelt, a little sad for me, so please bear with me. So, President Stroh, Superintendent McCowan, and board members, thank you for being here. Thank you for allowing us to be here tonight and joining us with congratulating the District Office's Certificated Employee of the Month, Ms. Stephanie Jones. So, Stephanie has been working in education for 19 years. And she's been a special ed teacher, she's been a director, a coordinator, and now in her current position, she's a program specialist. She started she started being a program specialist here about 4 years ago, but if I am right, I think she actually started here in Valley Center around 1976 as a kindergartner, right? So we're very happy that she returned. For the first 3 years here, Stephanie was the only program specialist. So with that and all of the tasks that she had every day, she did get to know all the sites and all the staff, and she built really great relationships with everyone across the district. So as I was preparing for tonight, I also have a few comments from staff across the district about Stephanie. She always goes above and beyond. Stephanie is a true professional, even in the most challenging situations. Her communication and follow-through are amazing at all hours. And Stephanie will jump in and help in any situation, from teaching the class to helping a student in crisis. Stephanie is the SACE expert, and we're very thankful for that. So this year, Stephanie provides support to our secondary schools, so our, excuse me, our middle school, our high school, OG, and VC Prep. So on a daily basis, you will find her at one of the schools or all of the schools, and she's typically in a classroom or helping write IEPs or attending IEP meetings or problem solving with a student or just collaborating with the site admin. She continues to assist from a district-wide standpoint with our compliance across the district and special ed, and all of the out-of-district placements, which includes all of our non-public schools, our residential treatment centers, and then also students placed in our SELPA area school districts. And most importantly, or probably for the district standpoint, most importantly, she also is in charge of our Medi-Cal reimbursement. And in the future, you'll receive some more details about that. But she has significantly turned that around in the 4 years that she's been here, which really helps offset some of the costs for our high needs of students and the equipment assessments, things that now we can purchase as a result of the Medi-Cal. And it takes a lot of work, so I'm very grateful. It's a lot of work. So Stephanie is a true advocate for students, and I can tell you I could not do my job without her. And I really enjoy working with her, but I'm thankful for her every day. So congratulations, well deserved.
Okay, I'm nervous too. Thank you. It is such a privilege to be honored in front of my colleagues who I absolutely look up to you all so much. So it's it's a privilege. As like Doyen said, I started at Valley Center when I was in kindergarten. So to be able to come back here and to really serve the community that raised me is quite a privilege as well. I told this story to some of you before. You know, I think some jobs are jobs and some are callings, and I think this is my calling, and to be recognized for something that I love so much is amazing. So every year I can remember a teacher pairing me up with a student who had special needs and just needed a little extra help. So I think this district is what called me to this profession, so I'm just very thankful. I really appreciate it.
Thing, and I'd like to just say a little bit on this huge responsibility she has and how well she has just gripped it and is heartfelt and has, we're blessed to have all of her attributes, because that is a high calling, never ending, always changing, right? Everything, and advocate for the students. It's pretty amazing, and we're blessed. Thank you. And at this time, if you've come tonight just for the presentations to celebrate, and you can feel free now if you'd like to leave, or you can stay as we move forward into our board meeting. But you are more than welcome to stay.
We do have some excitement coming.
We do have some excitement coming. His report. Okay, you might want to stay. And do we have anyone who would like to address the board?
We have nobody to address the board tonight.
Okay. Being none, we will move on to the consent agenda.
And this month, it was my job to review all the purchase orders. All my questions were answered, so I move that we approve the consent calendar and the updated personnel listing.
Okay, thank you, Benjamin. And do I have a motion?
Is the
You may-
motion, so a second?
Second? Member Kolb Senior, second. And let's vote. Member Benjamin?
Aye.
Member Caputo? Member Kolb Senior? Member Polito? And Member Stroh votes aye. Superintendent's Division, Superintendent's Report.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Stroh. We have some great events that happen this first couple weeks of school. It's always an exciting time, so we're going to share some of that excitement with you. First off, we'll start with some first day of school pictures. We did have a picture contest this year for the first time ever, and we had, I think it was about 165 people gave some pictures, which is great. My plan is to go down and pick up some coupons from the deli for ice cream and distribute those out to our students who won those pictures. So that should be a lot of fun. Here's some right here at the primary school. They always seem to start out with some, I think they call it mousercise, or yeah, so they had a lot of fun getting some activity out there. You can see around campus at Pauma, we got some teachers that are all in the Pauma spirit, and then they also had a rally the first couple of days, which most of our schools did. Here's a picture of the kids at that outdoor rally to kick school off. Here we have the first day at Lilac Lizard, so again, some more staff ready to go, and then the kids out there enjoying the playground the first day, rocking their lilac swag there. First day over at the Jaguars, you see some of our students who took pictures of their first day of school. We didn't expect to get a whole lot of high school pictures, but we did. And so that was a nice thing to see. And then down here we have a middle school. This is at their break there with Mr. Morningstar, and you can see that the students are happy. And to be honest, the weather for our kickoff of the school year was probably one of the best we have had. It wasn't in the triple digits, so we were real thankful for that. Now we get to our back-to-school nights. We've had almost all of our schools. I think next week we have the primary school left, and so we'll be doing those next week. But around the campuses here, we have the elementary back-to-school night. You can see the book fair, which our parent clubs run at all of our elementary schools for the back-to-school night. We also have here over at Pauma, they had a great dinner down there, and everybody having a lot of fun as they get ready to go see their classrooms. And then here's back at Lilac, at the back-to-school night at Lilac. Great barbecue going. I think I've had quite a few barbecued hamburgers and hot dogs the last week, so looking forward to that diet. And then here's the one at the back-to-school night at the middle school, and you can see there a couple of teachers presenting their curriculum and their plans for the year to the parents, and then some of the people outside the campus there. And Valley Center High School had theirs on Tuesday night, also another great barbecue. And here you can see where we're having our counselors out there that are helping our students and parents make sure that they can get to all 6 of their classrooms. I think they had 10 minutes in the classroom and 5 minutes to get to their classes. So they got to feel what a real school day is like for their kids. It's a lot of fun to watch. Here we have our National IT Professional Day. We have Mauricio here from our IT department tonight. So we want to make sure and give a shout out to all of our IT personnel, and we'll be providing a special afternoon for them a little later. Also, we gave our In Kudos Awards at our Welcome Back. If we remember right, this is one of our recognition programs where each school site recognized each students in these teachers in these individual categories, and then we picked district-wide representatives. So here you can see Armando Reyes Zarat. He's our silent hero. And then next to him is Susanna Henderson. She's our instructional dynamo. Kim Arocha and Jill Keene. And Mercedes Nichols, the kindness, service, and support. Mackenzie Dotinga, who was a teacher that went the extra mile. Elizabeth Libby Nolan, who had the it factor that really impresses on us. And then Rob Gilster, our retired Rob Gilster, who was our MVP Pro. That really is what we want to stand for as a Valley Center-Pauma Unified School District. So shout out to all the award winners, and it was a lot of fun. I've got myself up there. We have board president Julie Stroh, our assistant superintendent. We have Mary Polito, board member, and then also Paul Binneman, the vice president of the board, was there. So a lot of fun at the Welcome Back. This year we did do a 9/11 remembrance and celebration. This is a gentleman, Gene Johnson. He's a World War II veteran. He has been given an honorary medal from our ambassador for the Army Reserves, Mr. Jim Burnett, and a couple of soldiers. This was a neat thing during the pep rally. Through the 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday, we also had a gentleman coming around. Let me go back one. Mr. Van sorry about that, Van Morris.
Not Morrison, Morris.
I've said Van Morris a couple of times. And Van Morris came, he did a 9/11 patriotic thing. He worked with a lot of our staffs and our students, talking about how they can connect the dots between your freedoms and then how you get your liberties. It was a really great experience. We did not get to do that same program at the high school level because it was a rally. So there is a plan that we're going to bring Mr. Van Morrison back, and he'll do some more presentations for us and do some motivational stuff with our high school. This is the night that we celebrated the 9/11. The top picture is Army Captain Brian Kwan. He was the one that kind of helped us set up the whole thing. And then also we have our new superintendent of the Escondido School District who was there with me, John Peterson, who most of you guys know very well. It was fun to be able to see him that evening. And down in the bottom picture there, we have the coin toss after a great ceremony on the field. That is our Valley Center fire captain, Mr. Joe Napier, and then in the uniform there is Brian Kwan again. And this is some of the pictures from that. You can see our ASB kids with the American flag. The bell there was an Eagle project that was done by the young man who's ringing the bell in the picture with Joe Napier, and that was the kind of the final bill to recognize those that were lost in the 9/11 attacks. A very touching night, and I think one that really was great for our community, to kind of bring our community back together around certain things that I think we all hold true. This is another piece of the 9/11 ceremony that we had in our town here at the fire station. There was the reading of all the names, and the top picture is Julie Stroh as she read several names, and then I'm down at the bottom reading names at the fire station. So want to really appreciate Joe Napier and the fire department that puts on an event like that for our community. And now we'll get back to business. Thank you.
And I just want to expound just a little bit on the Van Morris, because it was such a unifying experience. I went to some of the assemblies he did at all the schools, and the Valley Center High School Foundation is what helped fund that, but it was so unifying. And I just want to give one little example because it kind of says it in a nutshell. It was at Lilac. Here you are. Well, he also did the Oak Glen School, and there were teachers that were heartfelt. You saw tears. It was unbelievably motivating and challenging to people to hear what he had to say and his story as well. But here's a little girl, he's up there talking and telling the kids what you can be, what you want to be, and she's frantically waving her hand, and he called on her, and she just says, "Are you the president of the United States?" Like he delivered in such a way, within 10 minutes, she knew he was saying something very important, and it was heartfelt. And what was she, Jameson? Was she kindergartner or TK, first grader? Kindergartner. And he connect with kindergartners to our Oak Glen students and high school students, and then the big deal at the football field. So anyways, I'll move on with that. But it was very unifying, and I thought it was a great plus for our district. Okay, we will move on to the superintendent's, let's see, the new and revised board policy and administrative regulations will be brought before the board for a second reading on October 12th, 2023, a meeting at which that time the board will consider them for approval. And the board will conduct its first reading of the following revised board policies and administrative regulations: AR 4112-2 and BP 4112-2, BP 5117, and BP 5141.5. Revised policy 4112-2, certification policy updated to reflect newly adopted regulations to implemented statutory changes related to the Commission on Teachers Credentialing, the CTC. Revised administrative regulation certification regulation updated to clarify the district's ability to establish fees and requirements in certain circumstances related to the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, CTC, regulation also updated to align with the new laws. Revised Board Policy 5117, interdistrict attendance policy updated to reference the new laws. And then we have new Board Policy 5141.5, mental health, new policies established guidelines regarding the importance of social connection and the impact of social media on health and well-being. Policy also addresses the new law and requirements of the California Department of Education. And moving into the business division, DS and C, board presentation from Dale Scott. He will make the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Dale Scott. I work as a financial advisor for school districts around the state of California. I've been doing this for quite a few years with quite a few districts, over a couple hundred, I'm sure. And almost in every time when I stand up in front of a board and I say that I'm going to start talking about this district's bond program, I pause because there's usually a rush for the doors from the audience, so I won't take it personal if anybody wants to leave at this point, even though I'm sure it's going to be scintillating and fascinating. So this was what, the superintendent was telling you when he said, we've got some great presentations. So what I want to talk about is somewhat where you've been and then where you can go. And our job is really, my job is really to bring you ideas and ability and techniques to fund schools. And then it's your job to decide whether you want to do that and whether that is something you want to go forward. So I'm not trying to exactly sell you something. I'm trying to give you what the opportunities are, and then it's up to you to decide which direction you want to go. So let's start by looking at a little bit about where you've been. This slide shows pretty remarkable, actually, for a school district your size. There has only been one bond election in this district that we could find in 1992, which, using new math, is over 20 years ago. $6.2 million was a fair amount of money then. Of course, it's not much now. And that money is, of course, long gone. And the bonds have been paid off some time ago. I know you have, I guess I'm going to give you the good news and the bad news. You have some funds available, I understand. You have money in your developer fees, about $9 million or so. You have the ability to perhaps bond against the CFD. That may work, that may not work. Unfortunately, in the state of California, there aren't many other alternatives to fund school district improvements and construction and new facilities and security. It's unfortunate, but it's the way the system works. The only real way that districts can, almost the only way you can get significant funds, absent having a lot of new construction be coming in immediately, is to go to the voters and ask them to approve a local bond. So that's kind of the bad news. There's not really any other significant ways to raise funds. The good news is these are truly locally controlled. The state can't take the funds after you pass them, and you as a board have the ability to really determine how that, within the law, how those funds are going to be first borrowed, and I'll show you some examples, and then how those funds are going to be used. There's really a great deal of local control. The tough part, however, of course, is you have to get it approved by the voters. So let's go over a little bit of that. I'm going to take you through how these bonds get structured, and then we'll talk about the voting part. The key piece of these bond issues is the underlying what's called assessed valuation. Those of you that own a home or a building anywhere, a property in the district, you know what that is. The assessed valuation is the taxable value of a piece of property. I say that because there's a difference between market value and assessed value. Somebody says, oh my goodness, every home here is selling for $200,000, it's selling for $300,000. Well, I will guarantee you have homes on your assessed valuation rolls that are assessed far below $100,000. Now, that doesn't mean they're all that way, but there are some low, some high. The assessed valuation is typically going up every year, but as you can see in this graph on the left-hand side, sometimes it goes down. That was the mortgage meltdown in 2008. Assessed valuations actually fell for a couple of years, and then for the past 10 years or so, you've averaged growth at between 4% and 6% per year. I don't think that's going to continue at that robust level, but certainly at 2 or 3% per year makes sense. To do a bond election in the state of California, you have to pick a date, an election date. Now, prior to the year 2000, bonds required a 2/3 majority to get passed. So, in fact, the bond that you passed in 1992, I think it was, over 2/3 of the voters in the district, voters who voted in the district, supported that bond. That was lowered in the year 2000 to a 55% threshold. But in addition to lowering that threshold, the requirement is now that you place that measure on a general election date. General election date being presidential election, gubernatorial election, primary election, board election, et cetera, et cetera. So we now have 20 years of data on those elections. There's been over 1,700 school bond elections in the state of California since the year 2001. How do they do? Pretty easy to understand. They do very well in presidential elections. They do pretty well in gubernatorial elections, not quite as well, and they struggle in any other election. So quantitatively, roughly 80% of the elections that were on the presidential ballot, school bond elections on the presidential ballot, have passed, 70% in gubernatorial elections, 65% in other elections. Why? We're kind of looking at it in front of you here. On the left-hand side, you can see voter turnout. This is for San Diego County. We can't get it quite to the granular level of view. The blue, the dark blue, is a presidential election. So in November of 20, in San Diego County, there were 82% or so of the voters who were registered voted, showed up and voted. If you look at June of 22, which was the gubernatorial primary, it was less than 40%. So why is this important? And I'm sorry if I'm going a little bit longer than I expected on this, but it's a good story. Many years ago, we were interviewing a political consultant to help with a election up in Kern County with Bakersfield. And the consultant said something that always stayed with me. He said, Dale, the voters are like my family. He says, my father, rock rib Republican. He is never going to vote for a bond election no matter what you do. No matter what you tell him, he will not vote for this, and he never misses a vote. He votes in every election. My mother, she's not quite as conservative as my father. She'd like to vote for the election, for the bond election, but she wants to make sure it's a good deal. And it's good for the community, and it's good for the schools. My sister, single mom, she's never seen a school bond election she doesn't love. You know, she'll vote for anything, but she doesn't vote very often. She's pretty busy. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to ignore my father. We're going to get my mother the information she needs, and we're going to figure out what election my sister votes in. That was his strategy. Pretty good, actually. That's why it's the presidential election that really provides districts such as yours, which are a fiscally conservative district. There's no way around it. You can look at on the right-hand side, Republican registration, which I think is a good indicator of fiscal conservatism in a district. 42%, that's about double the average of the state of California. 28% Democrat, that's about half. And then you have a large group of non-declared voters. In most districts around the state, frankly, the undeclared voter tends to lean Democrat. I would say it probably splits here. That would be my bet. Half Republican, half Democrat. So you have a very conservative, fiscally conservative district. Okay. Second piece of that law that was passed in 2000 regarding school bonds, which lowered it to 55%, is it also imposed a tax rate limit, a limit per $100,000 of assessed valuation on any school bond that's passed. That wasn't the way it was prior to that. Prior to that, it was whatever amount you wanted. But to get that 55%, the limit is for a high school district and an elementary district, $30 per $100,000. For a unified district like yourself, $60 per $100,000 of assessed valuation. Now remember what I said. Some homes are assessed at $100,000, some homes are assessed at $300,000. It all depends on where you are, but that's the limit. In your district, if we take that assessed valuation growth rate that we were looking at modestly, 2 or 3% per year, use a $60 tax rate cap, that comes out to an amount of $84.6 million if you did the maximum amount for the maximum term, which you don't have to do, and I'll talk about that for in a minute. But that's sort of the max. Now, it sounds like a lot of money. It goes fast. I'll just tell you right now. It goes very fast with this school construction. I was telling your CBO before the meeting started, in 1998, I believe it was, we worked with Kern High School District on a $97.5 million school bond program. It was the largest school bond that had ever been passed in the state of California to that date, $97.5 million, which is now the amount that a small elementary district in Los Angeles County will do. So things change very quickly. This bond, as you can see, we're structuring it in a way that, in this example, and this is just sort of the first cut, it would be, if passed by the voters, you would have the authority to issue $84 million, but you don't issue it all at once, and you don't charge it all at once. So in this case, we've said, okay, maybe every 2 or 3 years, you'd issue about 1/3 of it. By issue, I mean you're selling it to investors, and then it gets paid off by the taxpayers over time. Now, in that case, in this example, where you have $84 million of funds available to the district, as the taxpayers are paying those off, they're paying both the principal and the interest on those bonds. And you can see in that pie chart what that looks like. That $84 million over 30 years or so is going to result in another $72 million of interest. That's just the way it works. If you have a home loan, you know. About the amount that you borrow is typically about the same amount as the interest you pay over a 25-year period. That's the way it works. Interest may go up, interest may go down. Once you sell the bonds, it's locked in, but that's not going to change that interest rate much. But there are ways you can lower that, and I'm going to show you a few. One would be to sell the bonds in a very short term. So many districts do this for technology, but you can do it for facilities as well. In this case, I've said, okay, what if we did a bond election that assumed that you would borrow the money and pay it back in 3 years? And then at the end of that 3 years, you would issue the next piece, pay it off in 3 years, and then in 3 years, you'd issue the next piece, pay it off in 3 years. In that case, that would be about $10 million every 3 years. You can see in that chart that $10 million, if we put it all together, comes to $33 million, but the interest cost drops to $3 million. It's great, but the problem is you don't get $80 million. You only get $30 million, and you don't get it for very long. Another alternative would be to just do something similar to that, but just have a very, very reduced amount of time that you borrow it. In this case, I think we did it for about 12 years. And again, we can shrink that amount of interest by having a shorter amortization term. Another way, and you can see it in this chart, is you don't have to have it at $60. Remember I said that the tax rate maximum was $60. It can be $30, it can be $20, it can be whatever you as a board decide it's going to be. I won't go through the other alternatives. They're all about the same. It's all a matter of how do you manipulate these in a way that comes to a place where you feel comfortable with the amount of funds and that the taxpayers and voters feel comfortable that this is something that's going to make sense to them. But I will show you the pieces of the puzzle in this next and last slide. These are the steps in the process of getting to that bond election in the November of 2024. The first is the planning and structure, which is sort of what we're doing right here. There's obviously a lot more to it, but trying to figure out what works, what are your needs, what are you going to finance, what are the projects, how long are the taxpayers going to be asked to pay this back, et cetera, et cetera. We would also then suggest that you do a survey of your voters, a random survey. Now, this is done by an outside professional firm. We'll run it, but they'll be doing the interviewing, and it's done through a matter of phone interviews. It's also done by text. It's done online. We're trying to get as not only random, but also a survey that's representative of your voters, a vote. Those people there are voters, of course, that are registered that never vote, not interested in those. We're only interested in how the voters. And we ask them a number of questions. Not only would you vote for the bond, but what types of projects they would support, how they feel about the district, how they feel about the district's fiscal responsibility, et cetera, et cetera. And from that survey, then we would come back to you and say, this looks great, looks like you have a lot of support here, or not so great. You're going to have a fight or no, this is just not your time. Because there's really no reason of going forward if you don't have a chance to win these. And so the voter support, the voter survey is, I think, a critical piece. Board action, it requires a vote of the board to pass a resolution asking the county to put it on their ballot in November. I want to point out that the law also requires that that be passed by 2/3 of the board members, meaning it requires at least 4 board members to vote yes. It's not a simple majority. So 4 members. And then finally, once it's on the ballot, some districts do actually what are called advocacy campaigns. You obviously as a district can't do it. You can't spend any money telling people how to vote, but there may be a community group that wants to support it. That happens sometimes, sometimes not. You as a district can send information out to voters as long as it's fair and balanced, letting them know what you're going to be using the funds for, letting them know how much it would cost them, et cetera, et cetera. I'll just cover one more thing, and that's a brief item, which I don't have a slide for, on what kind of costs you can expect, general fund costs, and they're pretty low. Almost all of the expenses that are associated with this, and when I say all, that means our fee, by and large, legal fees, fees to underwrite the bonds, fees to sell the bonds, those are all contingent on the passage of the measure, and they are all paid out of the bond issue, not out of the district's general fund. The 2 items that do have to be paid out of the district's general fund would be the cost of the survey if you decided to go forward. That would be roughly, it can move around, but it's roughly $15,000 to $20,000, depending on how many voters you have. And then the second and the larger piece is the cost of the actual running of the election by the county. The county will charge you for that, and it's not cheap, and there's no way around it. Now, that can be reimbursed out of the bond election, out of the bond measure, but you have to pass the bond measure in order to have the funds to reimburse it. So almost all of the expenses are contingent as you're going along. It's not on an hourly fee, it's on a set fixed fee, and then at the end, if you pass it, it's reimbursable out of the bond measure. So with that sort of whirlwind tour, I'm happy to answer any questions for you about your situation in particular or about bonds in general.
I have one question. I'd heard that the state is also doing matching funds. Is that correct?
Yes, when they have the money.
Okay.
That's the hard part. Matching funds, that's a very good point. The state does typically have a matching fund program, and the only way you can really get the funds for the matching funds is through a school bond. Now, that doesn't mean the moment you get the school bond, you get the funds, but you get to get in line for those school funds, and then it reimburses you down the line. But yeah, if you get in line and you have the right projects and you handle it correctly, you will be reimbursed eventually. It is eventually, though. Yeah.
And Paul, that is one of the things that we would be chasing after, would be matching funds. Julie, did you have a question?
Well, that's what I was going to speak about as well, and that's at the completion of when whatever the matching funds are for, once that is, say it's 2K or whatever, then they're released.
Correct.
So one of the reasons we wanted to bring Mr. Scott out was to explain a little bit at the board, but really, when you look at school fundings, I know the idea of how we're taxed and how we're taxed in California. The good thing about school funds, school bonds, is they stay right here in our community and they serve our community, our students. The other piece of it is when you look at the school funding and how they fund our facilities, they just don't. We have done a really good job, I think, thanks to our business department and some work with some of our developers, that we do have $9 or $10 million for projects, which we would want to get matching funds also. But when we looked at our multi-year long-range plan for our facilities, we're looking at more around 60 to 65 million to really bring our campuses up to the level that we want to have them to be able to serve our students. And so that was the reason to bring Mr. Scott in. And the idea of getting direction from the board, it's not actually a vote from the board, of doing a survey which I think the price is around $15,000 to do that survey. So we can just find out, does our community have an appetite for a bond? And if so, then we would pursue it. If not, then we would look at some other funding areas, but it would really hamper the ability of us to bring our schools up to date. So,
I had one other question, Mr. Scott. So if we have you come on board, we hire you, your organization, to do this, do you survey, but in doing that survey, are you promoting it or giving them the facts? How do we get the word out, and are you help orchestrate that?
Good
'Cause
question.
that's a good,
So the survey is not meant to try to convince people.
okay,
The survey really wants to hear without giving them any, in fact, the way the survey works, just very briefly, is once that person starts the first couple of questions I call warm-up questions. They're sort of to make sure the person understands they're not trying to sell them anything or get their, code to their bank account. And then they ask them, read them the ballot language. Okay, the district is thinking about putting this bond on the measure. Let me read this to you, and we draft what we think it's going to be. It will change. And from there, that's our base. And then we go through and ask various questions about if you knew it would cost such and such, would you be more or less? If you knew the project funds would be used for such and such, would you be more or less? And then we ask them the question again at the end to see if there's any movement as they get that information. Once you get the item on the ballot, getting information out, I mean, just sitting in this audience and listening to what's been going on in this community, you have people that are going to be very interested in their schools. There's no doubt about it. I've been through hundreds of these campaigns, and you got to read very quickly on when there is a ethos within a community. Getting that information out in a way that people can understand, and getting that information out in a way that people say, yes, this is going to be good for can make a decision as to whether it's going to be good for their community or not. That's the task, and yes, we do help with that.
and you help?
Yes.
Okay. So your past results have been doing the research, getting the information, and how close are you, once it goes to the vote, are you pretty close in
For the survey?
those things? Yeah.
Yeah, the survey is remarkable. And I know surveys have deteriorated over time. It's more difficult to get people on the phone. It's more difficult to get them to stay on the phone.
Sure.
But they're remarkably accurate. By and large, when you get a person on the phone that wants to, and you're asking them a question about their local school system, they want to talk. I mean, it's different than a survey about, how do you feel about the national park system? It's something that's in their community. So what we find is what you'd expect. It's pretty much a bell curve. We have about 85%, 80% that's within that range of 5% either side of where we at, and then you have some people out on the edge. Something goes really, really good, something goes really, really bad, and they're not there, the world changes. But by and large, that survey for a presidential campaign, presidential election, is pretty accurate. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think the survey is the next logical step.
Absolutely.
Everything else, who cares about it if the voters aren't interested in supporting it, so, yeah.
I'll work with Michael and Mr. Scott. We'll put something together.
I think,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, excited to move forward. Okay. Great presentation, and let's move forward. This is to approve 2023-2024-08 GAN limit resolution and appropriations limit calculation. Do I have a motion? So moved. And a second?
I'll second.
Second. And is there any discussion? Being none, voting, Member Benjamin?
Aye.
Member Caputo? Aye. Member Kolb Senior? Aye. Member Polito? Aye. And Member Stroh votes aye. The decrease mission federal purchase card, credit card line of credit, we're going to decrease it from 33,000 to 10,000. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second? And any discussion? Being none, Member Benjamin?
Aye.
Member Caputo?
Aye.
Member Kolb Senior? Member Polito? And Member Stroh votes aye. Educational Services, public hearing resolution 2023-2024-07 for board approval of public textbooks and instructional materials and adoption of textbooks and instructional materials. And I'll gavel in, time in at 6:56. Gavel in. Is there any public comment on this agenda item?
We've received
No
no requests.
request. Time out at probably 6:56. And do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay, let's vote. Member Benjamin?
Aye.
Caputo?
Aye.
Kolb Senior? Polito? Stroh votes aye. VCPUSD 2023-2024 LCAP certificate, clarification items. Assistant Superintendent Mark Halewood will present to the board. Thank you.
President Stroh, members of the board, Superintendent McCowan, district staff, and guests, tonight I will be providing some information regarding our last step of the LCAP approval process for this school year. The San Diego County Office of Education reviews our developed LCAP that you voted on in June in 4 areas. Those are the adherence to the state board template and requirements, sufficient expenditures to implement the LCAP, adherence to expenditure regulations, and calculation and implementation of any carryover funds. The county reviews all of our documentation in each of those areas and then gives us feedback. That feedback is a review process of a back and forth with the county and can be a request for items to be changed or just clarification on items and areas listed in the LCAP. I'm happy to share that we did not receive any required changes, so that's really good. And working with the county, we were able to provide all the requested clarification items, and tonight I'll just be reviewing those items that were requested for clarification. The first area for clarification requested was one of our priority metrics, specifically the language in our parent, student, and staff surveys related to safety and school connectedness. There was no suggestion from the county that our surveys were not done properly or that the language in it was not appropriate. It was that they asked us just to clarify how that was listed in our LCAP. So their clarification was a request to add examples of the language that was used in our survey in those 2 areas, school safety and school connectedness. Working with the county, we went ahead and we did add in example statements into our LCAP language. And the 2 examples that we listed were one survey question where parents, students, and staff were asked, is your school a safe place? And then the other one, the school connects with my students. So the county felt that just the examples of these 2 questions met the clarification needs that they had. Just because we like to go a little bit further than that sometimes, in addition to adding these 2 statements, we did also go ahead and add a table that showed the results from our LCAP questions for each of these questions and all related questions. So at the very end of our LCAP, you'll also see an additional table that outlines the responses from each group for those areas. The second area was in our listing of actions related to increased and improved services for unduplicated students in our district. Just as a reminder, unduplicated students would be low-income students, students who are learning with the English learning designation, and homeless and foster care students. The clarifications requested were in 2 areas. The first, some specific actions that we had listed. Clarification was requested around the language describing those actions. So what we provided to the county was no changes in any details listed, but as similar to the surveys, we provided some examples just to clarify what this action may look like in our district. The other area that was requested related was in how we were categorizing some of our actions. So this part of our LCAP has 2 areas. One is how actions, we list actions that are specific to unduplicated students but are applied to an entire district or to an entire school site. And then another category is specific actions that are only for a specific student group, an unduplicated group. So working with the county, they felt that a couple of our actions would be better suited in certain categories. So again, no details were changed and no actions or anything was changed. It was just moving some of these actions into different categories. And so the listings for those changes in those categories are in the presentation tonight. The good news is those were the only areas of clarification that were asked for, so only a couple of slides there. So after concluding this process of clarification with the county over the summer, all aspects of our LCAP were accepted, and we received notification of approval from the San Diego County Office of Education on September 1st. This year, we will be providing a mid-year report based on required criteria from the state on the progress of the actions in our LCAP. This has occurred in past years. We typically do a mid-year report, whether it's a requirement or not. But this year, we will be providing a mid-year report based on the template that the state will be giving us when they create it. So lastly, in the area of the LCAP, I'd just like to share that the LCAP is a result of many people's hard work. And so, in the very first screen I showed, one whole side of that is related to the budget and financials of our district. So I'd just like to give a really big thank you to Michael Aviles and former CBO John Peterson and our entire business services department, because there were no areas of clarification related to finances and budget, which is a rarity. That is not a common thing. So excellent job to our business services team. Our LCAP also is not written in isolation. So, our special education student services director, our special projects director, all of our ed services team, our site administrators, all have a big role in providing measures, providing data. So a big thank you to everybody there. The feedback given to us from our certificating classified staff also is integrated into our LCAP. So a big thank you to really everybody who's a part of our district. Parents and advisory groups also have an opportunity to provide input, so a big thank you to them. Students, which is a wonderful thing. We do ask students how we're doing, and we take that input and provide it. And then lastly, a thank you to you, our school board, for your support and guidance through the whole process. And if you have any questions about the LCAP final approval, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? I want to say thank you. Do you have something you want to? Okay. I just wanted to say thank you for good job. And the team. I mean, it is a team, right? We're a team. We're all a team working unified together to make this, and thanks for the outcome and being the orchestrator and getting everything brought together. But thank you, and business office, so really proud of everybody working together. Okay, moving forward into the presentation for VCPUSD Behavior Interventions and Supports. Assistant Superintendent Mark Halewood will present this. Thank you.
You're welcome. So tonight I'd like to provide you with some information and work done in preparation for this school year around interventions and supports for student and families. This was a topic that came up last year, and so as we were moving through the summer, we kind of really started to revisit our work in some of these areas and put things in place to start this school year, but also work that will continue as we move through this school year. So this was revisiting our systems of intervention and looking at 4 focus areas: academics, attendance, behavior, and social emotional learning. To help us structure our work and assist students at various levels, we are using a tiered approach. So a quick explanation of the tier diagram you see there. Tier 1 would be what is considered universal. So this is the work we do encompassing the majority of our students, and our supports and interventions that are essentially things that are put in place for everybody. So all students in our district. Tier 2 is specialized. So this focuses on those students or even families who may need extra assistance beyond those Tier 1 universal interventions. And then Tier 3 is individualized. So this is individual supports put in place specifically related to an individual's needs. So more customized and definitely individualized for that student. Tonight, I'd like to just give you a kind of a little bit of information on the work that we've done in the area of behavior at our school sites and throughout our district, kind of, again, planning during the summer as what some of the things we're going to work on. Most of these will be in the Tier 1 area, and then I will highlight some of the things that would relate to Tier 2 and 3. So here's a really nice, simple overview of our approach that we put together for our district when we are with our focus on behavior. So it all starts right there at the top with, really what are our shared beliefs around the expectations for how students are behaving on our school sites. And this isn't just the expectations or shared beliefs that we have as employees of the district. This is also for the parents and families in our district, for the students themselves. Trying to take all of that information, what do we want our students' behavior to look like when they're at school each day? You can see this word up here, and it's going to come up, is expectations. So we're talking about behavioral expectations. So not corrections necessarily, just this idea of clarifying throughout our entire district, what do we want to see? What are the things that we're making very clear that we want to see from our students when they're at our schools? And then, as you can see, kind of as we move down, the communication of this is incredibly important. So how are we communicating those behavioral expectations? What procedures are we putting in place to communicate them, to reinforce them, and then to provide correction when they're not being met? And then at the very bottom, you could see that this relates to all areas of our school. So not only in the classroom, but outside of the classroom. So I think oftentimes we think of behavior as problems, like things that are coming up that are problematic, but really the best approach to behavior is to make it very clear what behavior you want to see, what behavior you want to see in the classroom, what behavior you want to see in the lunch line, and then clarifying that and making it very clear throughout your entire school community so that everybody knows what those expectations would look like. So to show you an example of that, a big thank you to Principal Veronica Ruiz and the entire primary school staff who had this out on their first day of school. And just to clarify, there are many schools in our district who had something very similar, but this one I happen to be able to engage in. And so I'd like to provide this example. So as far as our 3 to 5 behavioral expectations for the primary school, we have be safe, and I don't know how to, for those who can't see the slide, I guess it's B as in a buzz, right? Be safe. A buzzing bee, yes. Be respectful, and then be a learner. So those are expectations that are communicated throughout a school site, and then depending on the environment, depending on the place, what does that look like? So in this example, you can see this is actually from the playground expectations for behavior, where you can see what does it mean to be safe, and what are we telling our students that looks like? What does it mean to be respectful? What does it mean to be a learner? I had the opportunity to be at the primary school for the first day of school, and I was so impressed. I was down in the playground area during lunch, and I had an opportunity to see a lunch supervisor who did it exactly the way we would want to see. A student was learning how to behave on the first day of school on the playground, and the lunch supervisor said, rather than saying, hey, stop doing that, which is not inappropriate, but on a first day, we want to say, hey, what does it mean to be respectful on the playground? And then this, I think it was probably a kindergartner, actually kind of gave the answer we want. It means to use kind words, like I should be nice, in their verbiage, and then getting the positive reinforcement from the staff member, yes, that is what it means to be respectful at this school. So again, some great examples that we're already seeing and work we're just going to continue with as we move through the school year. Part of that work is also a partnership that we have established with the San Diego County Office of Education. So we don't work in isolation, and we always want to make sure that we're getting new information. We're working with those who are also working in these areas throughout our county. So we've engaged in this partnership where we'll be looking at what's known as PBIS, or Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. We have teams at each school site in our district, and those teams will be joining the county for some workshops. It's a 5-day series, so 5 days for our elementary teams and 5 days for our secondary teams, where they'll be going either down to the San Diego County Office of Education or to our County Office of Education in San Marcos. And here you can see some of the items that they'll be working on as they go through the year. A great part of this partnership is it's not just going to our workshop. It's also walking through our schools, members of the county office will be coming and visiting and giving us some feedback like, hey, you're doing a great job in this area related to, as we were walking around the playground. So we're getting a lot of positive feedback, a lot of debriefing, really engaging all of our staff, because this is something that we all work on together. And then because we do have language related to this in our LCAP, we always want to look at how are we measuring it? How are we looking at our success? So working with the county, we've decided to use something called the Tiered Fidelity Inventory, which is basically a list of items that we want to see. Many of them are listed right here on this chart. And then that would be included in surveys that we give to our staff. If I go out to a school site, I may say, okay, I'm going to pick 10 students. I'm going to ask them some questions, get some feedback, and then be able to use that to measure how are we doing as far as meeting the behavior needs of each school. So some nice ways to measure our implementation and how effective those things are being. Another partnership that we would be engaging in would be the Crisis Prevention Institute. This is something that our district has worked with for many years. But this year, we want to kind of take it one step further. At a request from our staff, we want to go ahead and provide the nonviolent crisis intervention training to all staff members. So this is a focus on hands-off and verbal intervention strategies to address behavior as it's escalating. So it's basically a lot of de-escalation work to really make sure that things don't move to that high-level behavior where even safety issues might come up. So all of our staff members will be trained in this area and on our October and December early release days. And a big thank you to our two district trainers, Stephanie Jones and Linda Ford, who themselves have done a huge work to become certified CPI trainers, and now we'll be bringing that and training our staff throughout our district. And like I said, my last slide, we don't work in isolation, so I just like to highlight a couple of the things regarding increased collaboration and supports that we've been working on as we move into the year. So really a focus on meeting the needs of our students, some of the partnerships that we've established. So working with Cal Poly Humboldt, I think that's where our superintendent, I was gonna say, I was waiting, all right? I'm sorry. Yeah, go Humboldt. I don't know what the mascot is, I'm sorry, yeah. And then Cal State San Marcos, we have 3 social work interns who are now placed in our district at the elementary school, the middle school, and our high school. And these interns are supervised by our district social worker, Nikki Day. Another partnership would be, with the San Diego County Office of Education, working together to support our special education staff, participating in their intern program with our designated district site mentor, a name you've already heard a few times tonight, program specialist Stephanie Jones. And then a last one that I think is going to be very impactful, working in collaboration with Indian Health. We're in the process of putting this into place, which would be additional mental health services in the forms of counseling being offered at the high school level, services primarily for Native American students as a supplement to the mental health supports that we already have in place in our district. So this is just kind of an overview, and as we go through the year, I'll be able to give some updates on our work and also share some of the interventions in some of the other areas I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. I'd also be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Anybody have any questions? I think this is fantastic and how you presented it, and just thank you to our staff, every person that is coming alongside and making this happen for the betterment and enhancement of our students. But I love what you said about making it clear, clarity and collaboration and unified together. That's what it's about, being on the same team. So thank you, Mark. Great presentation. And with that, we will move to advanced planning. The next regular board meeting is scheduled for Thursday, October 12th, 2023 at 6 p.m., High School Media Center. And moving to adjournment, do I have a motion? So moved. And seconded? Second? And any discussion? Okay, go for the vote. Member Benjamin? Caputo? Kolb Senior? And Polito? And Member Stroh votes aye. Thank you very much, and it is, what is the time? 7:15. Thank you, and have a great weekend. Moving on.